Us now on our think tank this evening, criminal defense attorneys Titus Nichols and Jesse Law, and joining us from New York, attorney Bernarda Villalona and criminal defense attorney James Porfido. James, I want to start with you. Your reaction to this verdict. What stood out to you about what the jury decided in terms of Harvey's fate?
Well, the jury came back with the not guilties on the most serious counts, the predatory sexual counts, which were very surprising. But I think what that says to me, counts 1 and counts 3 of the indictment, were that Annabella Sciorra was not believable, and they did not find that to be credible testimony. So he was convicted of those counts, the 2 counts, which were less serious, less significant, but certainly the most significant counts that the prosecution was looking to convict Harvey Weinstein of. He was found not guilty. So I'm not surprised because if you look at the allegations, they date back to 1994, and they really would have had to tie all of this together, and it just didn't make sense, quite frankly, from a prosecution perspective. Having been a former prosecutor, prosecuting these types of cases, it's a very difficult prosecution looking back that far. Again, there were some inconsistencies in the verdict nonetheless.
Bernarda, time was an issue with everybody, really, except for Jessica Mann, and she had her own issues. What did you take from this verdict? What stood out to you?
Well, what stood out to me is that I found it that they didn't find him guilty regarding Annabella Sciorra, because I personally thought that she was the strongest witness, the most likable, the most believable. So I was surprised that they didn't find Harvey Weinstein guilty of at least the first count of predatory sexual assault. But either way, Harvey Weinstein decided to have a jury trial. He wanted to be judged by a jury of his peers, and he got judged by a jury of his peers, and his peers came back and called him guilty.
Jesse, many people thought that Harvey Weinstein had a real legitimate shot of walking or hobbling out of that courthouse after it was all said and done. That didn't happen. Were you surprised?
Not really. I mean, initially I had mentioned that I would have been surprised if he was found guilty on all 5 charges. But you got to give it into context that a lot of the victims who came forward, they did have a real uphill battle because of the age of these incidences. And also they have been telling their stories to so many people over so long that they've not been believed. I am really impressed. I'm really impressed that this jury took the time to listen to the law, listen to the facts, and they found that at least 2 of the victims were credible enough to come back with a guilty verdict. And Annabella Sciorra, I don't mean to say that she's not believable or she's not credible, but she had a real uphill battle with her case. And I'm just sorry that the jury did not find her credible enough to come back with a verdict, but she really had an uphill battle. So I'm not surprised by the verdict, but I'm glad that at least it was on at least 2 of the 5 counts.
27 years was Annabella Sciorra's story. I think the time was a major problem for her, and it's likely that the jury had an issue with it, or the jury, Titus, might have been making some deals back there too. Let's let him go on the 2 top ones if everybody agrees to get the conviction on the other. They're not supposed to do that, but that happens, does it not?
It happens far more than we'd like. Being a former prosecutor myself, one reality you have to face is that many times your job as the prosecutor is not just to show the defendant committed the offense beyond a reasonable doubt, but you have to give the jurors a reason to convict them of this serious crime. Sex-related crimes are different because once convicted, there is no explanation. There is no self-defense. There is no accidental. Once you're convicted, you are forever known as a sex offender, or in Harvey Weinstein's case, a rapist. So in this situation, there might have been some deal-making between the jurors as to what they felt he was culpable of and what they just did not feel comfortable convicting him of.
All right, when we come back, we're going to talk about the next steps. The defense thinks they have many opportunities for an appeal. They also think there's an opportunity to get him out pending an appeal. It might be a stretch. We'll talk to our tank about that after this. Welcome back. That is a sketch from the courtroom today. And there you see Harvey Weinstein with his walker and handcuffs for the first time. Harvey Weinstein in handcuffs since his arrest. in this case. That from earlier today. Again, our breaking news throughout the night today. Harvey Weinstein found guilty on 2 counts. He faces the possibility maximum sentence in this New York case of 29 years in prison. That likely isn't going to happen. I want to bring back the think tank, Titus Nichols, Jesse Law, James Porfido, and Bernardo Villalona. Bernardo, to you first, what do you think Judge Burke is going to do here? Do you know, if this was a regular case in New York, what would a judge do? Take away all of the media attention, everything else. He's exposed to 29. What would someone normally get, and what do you expect to see?
Well, if it was a regular case that didn't get so much high press, I would think that he would get sentenced to about maybe around 8 to 10 years. That way he would be sentenced as to each of the victims with consecutive sentences. But this is not a regular case. This is Harvey Weinstein, and Judge Burke knows that all eyes are on him. Also take into account that when sentencing takes place on March 11th, which I don't think is going to take place, but the victims are entitled to make a statement to Judge Burke, giving him their reasons of why Harvey Weinstein should be sentenced to the highest amount of time possible in the eyes of the law.
So you think he's going to get a little bit more because of the high-profile nature? And let's face it, James, Judge Burke has done the defense no favors throughout this in most of his rulings. The defense team thinks they really have an opportunity on appeal. They also have thrown out the fact that they're going to work immediately to try to get an appellate judge to release Harvey Weinstein during the appeal process. That seems to me like quite the long shot.
Well, Ted, I don't know. There are a lot of appellate issues in this case. Quite frankly, these Mullineaux witnesses, which they were defined as, those 3 separate women that testified about prior bad acts, which we would call under Rule 404 evidence, under the federal rules of evidence, under New Jersey laws, rules of evidence, it's 404B type evidence where you have prior bad acts. This is a big grounds for appeal. Quite frankly, it's one of the biggest issues when you can't unring the bell. When a jury hears that Harvey Weinstein has committed these acts, not just with these victims that are, the part and the substance of the indictment, but also those separate victims are allowed to testify and say, yes, we in fact were victims of Harvey Weinstein as well. That's a big issue, quite frankly. And I think that that's an issue ripe for an appeal, and it may very well determine, and I understand there's other issues as well. With juror number 11, there were questions raised as to whether or not she had a predilection. Let's say she was
going to write a book.
Convict based upon her.
Yeah.
Right. She's writing a book, and it's
people like Harvey
about
Weinstein.
sexual predators.
Yeah.
Right. So, she was brought in separately by the court and voir dired separately. And quite frankly, she should have been dismissed from the jury. That is a huge issue in this case. And quite frankly, I think that this verdict will be overturned on an appeal, quite frankly, given the complexity of the case. Looking at the jury charge sheet, if you look at it, certainly the questions on Friday reflected the verdict today. They were clear that they had a verdict on 3 of the counts. Now we know they were not guilty on 3 counts and came back guilty on 2 counts, counts 2 and 5.
Jesse, James...
I think it's likely he will be released on bail.
All right. Fair enough. I don't think New York cares. I think they were steaming ahead. They wanted a conviction. They got it. They're celebrating tonight. Jesse, let's say, to James' point, there were no Molyneux witnesses. Mm-hmm. There were only 2. 2 women came in and told their stories, Jessica Mann and Mimi Halle. Would Harvey Weinstein have been found guilty?
Well, that's what the jury did find. They saw
But they had to James' point, this was a stacked deck, possibly. An appeals court may believe that. Would he have been found guilty if it was just those 2? Only those 2 came in and told their story.
From my point of view, I think those 2 women strongly encouraged the jury to find them guilty on those 2 counts with relation to their specific cases. With all the other women, all other prior bad acts that came in, with all the other information brought in from the other victims, the jury decided that there just wasn't enough information, not enough evidence to cross over the hurdle to prove their cases beyond a reasonable doubt. So with regards to the 2 victims that told their stories with regards to the sexual assault and with regards to the rape, The jury found them credible enough, and they found sufficient evidence that it established beyond reasonable doubt, and that's what they went for. Now, at the time of sentencing, it's really up to the judge whether the judge would allow the other victims to talk about incidences to which the jury did not find them guilty. Or it's also possible the jury will only hear from those two victims.
Titus, did it make a difference having those Molyneux witnesses having?
on that.
Oh, go ahead, James, and then I'll get to you, Titus.
Yeah, I disagree. I think that Rule 404B evidence, the prior bad acts, you have to show an absence of mistake or there was a common scheme or plan, and the judge has to be able to give what's called a curative instruction to a jury to say to them, you have to disregard, you can't find Harvey Weinstein guilty of these offenses that are charged in the indictment because you've heard from these other women. You can't unring that bell. Once they hear that there were 3 other women, they're more likely than not to convict him of these 2 counts involving these 2 particular victims. So I don't think that they testify alone. It's in mass. You can't separate it out. And I don't think the jury can do that. Once they've heard it, they don't have the ability, quite frankly, to unring that bell.
Was, Titus, this deck stacked against Harvey Weinstein?
It's hard to imagine a situation where the jurors were not thinking about the years of publicity, the years of stories, the years of press they've heard about this man sitting in front of them. It's nice to think that they were able to exclude all of that and that this trial took place in a vacuum. But the reality is when the appellate court looks at this, they're going to have to look at essentially 2 rules of evidence. 403, whether it was relevant, 404, whether it was prejudicial. Because the fact that you have all of these different individuals who were not charged on the indictment being used to show that Harvey Weinstein did commit the offense is going to have a substantive effect on the jury's deliberation, whether they come out and admit it or not. But I do think this is going to be ripe for an issue on appeal.
Donna Rotuno talked to Seema Iyer earlier this afternoon on Court TV. Let's take a listen to some of that.
You know, we feel very bittersweet today. I mean, you're right. He's not going away for the rest of his life, but Harvey's 67. He's not healthy. He's obviously dealing with many physical ailments. And so, you know, from our perspective right now, we wanted to be able to walk out onto those courtroom steps with him today. So it's never easy to be in the position where now that wasn't the case. But it's not over, and there are many appellate issues here, and the fight will continue.
How's Harvey doing now?
He's doing as good as could be expected under the circumstances. I think that his resolve and his strength throughout the course of the trial was pretty impressive, even after today's verdict.
Bernarda, how would a guy like Harvey Weinstein do at Rikers Island? How difficult is it going to be for him to do time?
Ted, Harvey Weinstein is not ready for what's coming for him. He's just not ready. I mean, I almost feel like, you know, you heard of people that take classes to prepare themselves to go to jail. I don't think Harvey Weinstein is one of the people that actually ever thought he would be going to jail. You know, Rikers, it's a different beast. It's a different beast. You know, now he's in a medical unit. They'll probably clear him health-wise and then put him in general population or in one of the sexual offenders units in Rikers. But you got to think, he's a 67-year-old man. Definitely looks much older than he is. He has all the health issues. He can't even stand up straight. I don't know if he'll survive in Rikers, but the reality is that he's going to get sentenced soon. I understand all the appellate issues, but it's time to move on. The judge is going to sentence him, and when he gets sentenced, 10 days after being sentenced, he's going upstate. He's going to an upstate prison, and he's going to be out of Rikers Island. So he's playing with the big boys now.
Yeah, well, and Jesse Lal, the state of New York's got to keep him alive after the Epstein situation. What about the idea of an appeal being successful? Jesse, it takes time. It takes a lot of time for it to work through the system, even with the best attorneys. It's a long shot, is it not?
It's a very long shot. And considering that he's been convicted of rape in the 3rd degree, these are crimes that have direct impact on victims. These are not victimless crimes. These are not financial related crimes. And a judge should treat this defendant who has been convicted of such a crime just as much as they would treat any other defendant in the city of New York. And for him to get special preference, that won't come across very well with the victims and the other people of New York.
Titus, he's getting, I guess, special treatment tonight. took him from the courthouse in an ambulance to Rikers Island, but that's only, as Bernarda said, going to last a certain amount of time, and then the real situation hits home for a guy like him. In your experience, for someone who is totally unprepared for it, isn't in that position, how difficult is that transition?
This is where the defense attorneys are going to have to begin their next battle. When I represented Reality Winner, when we were preparing for her sentencing, we had to seek out a professional who was able to advise her in regards to prison, in the federal prison, because essentially just because you're going to prison does not mean that it's going to be the same everywhere you go. You have the ability to provide a statement, to provide medical evidence to the court to say, we know he's going to be sentenced, we know he's going to prison. However, take this into consideration, take this medical condition into consideration, so that possibly he'll be sent to a different medical facility within the Department of Corrections, so that he's not just sent into general population with everyone else. Because you have to take into consideration that he is 67 years old, he does have medical conditions, and therefore there is the potential of liability on the Department of Corrections if something happens, if they don't take into consideration all those issues.
Right, here's Damon Chironis talking about just that, Harvey's medical condition and that infamous walker.
You know, people talk about this walker. It's taken on a life of its own. The last thing he wanted to do was walk into court with a walker, and that was something that he expressed to us, but it just wasn't to be.
Did you ever consider having the walker put in the back room where he would sit? Because yes, the walker had taken a life of its own. I understand that. I also understand that I think Donna, you made an application explaining that, hey, the jurors never saw the walker because they were not privy to his entrance and exit, although maybe they knew about it, a different appearance. But during the trial, was that ever a consideration? Just put it away.
We were so busy working on cross-examining witnesses.
I know.
And the walker didn't cross our mind.
Well, especially because
we had other things to do.
Well, especially because
Don't
we
blame
knew-
the question, David. You've been on set for 30 seconds
Literally,
already.
we didn't even consider where it was.
Well, the fact that we knew he needed it, so it was never an issue where we're thinking about, oh, this walker is such an, and he clearly walked in with it every single day. And when he would leave the courtroom, either to go to the back room or to leave, he needed the walker, so to have it close by was just the way it should be.
I did see him when he went to the bathroom.
Oh yeah,
with the
he would
walker.
use it every time, and so to us, we knew he needed it. So it was never something that we had to think about. Oh, how do we use the walker? The walker was something that was a part of him, and he walked in and out of court with it every day. So jurors, even potential jurors who would have been watching TV or had seen Harvey, knew from December on he was using a walker.
All right, the infamous walker, did it play? Was it real? Of course. The defense says he had a car accident, he had surgery, and he needed it. And they argued on his behalf successfully with Judge Burke today to get him medical treatment at Rikers. All right, we're going to step aside, take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about, was justice served today in New York? That and much more when we return. You're watching Court TV. Stay with us.
This is the woman who says she saw the white Bronco at the time of the murder parked in OJ's driveway.
On the next episode of OJ 25.
The best defense in the world is an alibi.
And you just made the reservation, didn't you?
See? Yes.
Ms. Lopez, we just called the airline. They don't show a reservation for you.
An all-new original true crime series, OJ 25. New episode Thursday night at 9/8 Central. Only on Court TV.
2 guilty verdicts were read of the 5. And of course, the prosecutors, no overt reaction from Jonah Luzzi and Megan Hast, who sat at their table in the courtroom, and there was nothing audible from the gallery during the reading of the verdict.
And I did get a look at Gloria Allred. She was sitting a few rows in front of me, and she had a very calm look to her. She was understanding what was going on, talking to people next to her, but also as that one representative in the courtroom for the victims, nothing overt from her.
It's been a long journey to justice, but I'm glad that this day is finally here. It was very tense in the courtroom. Most of all, I'm proud of my clients, Mimi. I'm also proud of my client, Lauren Marie Young, and I'm very, very proud of my client, Annabella Shora. And the only way to stop violence against women is when those who inflict violence on women have to pay the consequences. And today, Harvey Weinstein, you're gonna have to pay the consequences. You're already paying them because you're going out to Rikers Island in custody.
I want to get your initial reactions to the verdict.
Happiness, pure happiness, jumping for joy. This is the verdict I was really wishing for, not just for myself, but to establish a positive outcome, a positive experience to everything, and so that we could move forward the conversation so that things like this should not get to this point.
Weinstein, with his manipulation, his resources, his attorneys, his publicists, and his spies, did everything he could to silence the survivors. But they refused to be silent. They spoke from their hearts, and they were heard.
We were able to be successful on the top counts, which are the most important ones, for several reasons. Number one, he would not be entitled to bail pending appeal if he was convicted on the top count. So the fact that he is eligible for bail pending appeal, we're cautiously optimistic that an appellate court judge will allow him out over the next year while we're fighting this in the appellate courts.
We feel very bittersweet today. I mean, you're right. He's not going away for the rest of his life, but Harvey's 67. He's not healthy. He's obviously dealing with many physical ailments. And so, from our perspective right now, we wanted to be able to walk out onto those courtroom steps with him today. So it's never easy to be in the position where now that wasn't the case. But it's not over, and there are many appellate issues here, and the fight will continue.
Bernarda Villalona, I ask you first, was justice served with this verdict today?
Look, we trust the jury. That's why we say that we put all our trust in the justice system. Like I said, Harvey Weinstein wanted to be judged by a jury of his peers. So in being judged by a jury of his peers, he has to respect what the verdict is. And I think justice was done. The jury has spoken and found him guilty. We have to respect that verdict and just move along.
James, you agree with that?
I don't know. I think beauty's in the eye of the beholder. There's going to be a lot of people disappointed that he wasn't convicted of those most serious counts that carried the maximum sentences of life. There are those that are going to be celebrating. I mean, from a prosecution perspective, I was a former prosecutor. You're happy you got the jury to agree with you and convict on those counts that were obviously carry some significant time in and of themselves. As a defense attorney, you're obviously disappointed that the jury has found your client guilty. No matter what, you want an all out and out acquittal. From the victim's perspective, they may or may not be happy. I mean, some of them, I'm sure, are elated that he's been convicted, that they got the monster that they have described. But then there are going to be others that say it's not enough. It's just not enough. But Harvey Weinstein has a lot more facing him from California and elsewhere. So this is not it.
Not the end at all. Jesse Lal, did the Me Too movement permeate the courtroom, and was justice served, or was the deck stacked?
The Me Too movement was clearly everywhere. I mean, you have to be living in a cocoon, hidden under a rock, in a cave, 2,000 miles away from here to not have been part of or at least have heard of the Me Too movement. Now, was the deck stacked against Harvey Weinstein? The man has brought this baggage with him to this trial. And this is a sexual assault prosecution. They're so difficult to prove, and they're so difficult to get convicted. And the fact that he was convicted on 2 of the 5 counts, this is vindication for victims who were vilified in this trial. So hooray for the victims, even for those who are not happy with that he was not convicted on all charges.
Titus Nichols, your thoughts. Justice served?
There's enough within this verdict for both sides to claim some form of victory. Prosecution can say we was convicted on 2 of the counts. The jury believed the victims. Our work was not in vain. Defense can argue that he wasn't convicted of the more severe counts. In fact, his attorney already said that if he was convicted of the predatory charge, he wouldn't be eligible for bail. So now defense can continue to argue that he should be allowed out on bail pending the appeal.
The next step, Los Angeles. Should the state of California continue to pursue this as they have indicated today, or is he 67? Should they save some taxpayer money and just see where this goes in New York? Start with you, Bernarda.
Well, of course, California should proceed with their case. Remember that every victim is also entitled to their day in court. Just because he was convicted here in New York doesn't mean that that sentence or that conviction also takes care of the actions that Harvey Weinstein did against those women in California. Let them have their day in court. Let them speak in court. Let their voices also be heard. New York and California are two different places. Now, Harvey, you did your dirt here in New York and you answered for it. Now it's time for you to answer for your dirt in California. Let's not just brush it aside because you got convicted in New York. Because also in the end, you never know whether the conviction in New York is going to be reversed or whether it's going to stand. Now, after he gets sentenced here, California can deal with Harvey Weinstein. And then from there, whatever other counties or other countries that have counts against him, they can also deal with him.
James, California allows, in sex cases, the same thing, a version of the Molyneux. In fact, it's easier to get accusations that aren't charged into a California courtroom. Is this going to be another tough road for Harvey Weinstein?
It is. It really is. I mean, this is a very unique set of circumstances. In New York and California share that same law, allowing for other victims who are not the subject of the charges that are before the jury to testify and give their account, and obviously to discredit Harvey Weinstein and show that he is a sexual predator. That's exactly the reason why I think this is a hotbed issue for an appeal, to allow these separate witnesses, victims, to testify who are not the subject of the charges before the jury. I mean, the highly prejudicial aspects of that testimony cannot be unspoken. I think it's really a very powerful positive effect upon a jury to sway them towards a conviction versus an acquittal if they hear all of the evidence. And let's not forget the fact that this is he said, she said. These are very old allegations, many of them, and there is no forensic evidence. We don't have anything but credibility. And if we build on credibility, we look at the number of people saying that these things happen, what happens? The credibility increases.
Credibility, Jesse, was something that the defense wanted to use to their favor, saying that these victims weren't credible. The jury decided that they were credible, that Jessica Mann was credible, and that Mimi Halle was credible. Has the game changed? We know it's changed outside of the courtroom, that behavior in offices has changed because of Me Too. Has now that changed been made inside a courtroom? Do attorneys have to be careful of attacking a witness on the stand, especially in a sex case?
You have to be, because now they have portrayed this not simply as a, he said, she said, or was this consensual sex, or was this a consensual encounter? Now they're even looking at the different bargaining positions of both the perpetrator and the victim. And the prosecution in this particular case has done a wonderful, wonderful job of indicating how this particular encounters with Harvey Weinstein did show that the victims were clearly in a very, very inferior bargaining position. They were in the inferior position, and Harvey had all this power and this might to destroy them, not only physically, but financially and their careers. And so, yes, they have to be very careful.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come, first we're going to check in with Chanley Painter, Court TV legal correspondent, to see what is next for Harvey Weinstein.
Ted, now that Harvey Weinstein is a convicted rapist, with the jury today finding him guilty of rape in the 3rd degree and criminal sex act in the 1st degree, he spends the night at Rikers Island. In fact, he will stay there until his sentencing. He's brought back in front of Judge Burke March 11th for sentencing. With these convictions, he faces up to 25 years for criminal sex act and up to 4 years for the rape in the 3rd degree. Now, he also has looming charges in Los Angeles over his head, which the DA's office there says they are proceeding forward with those charges against Harvey Weinstein. The timing of that all is really uncertain at this point, but he faces 4 sex crime charges in Los Angeles with 2 accusers, one of those being a witness in his trial here in New York. Now, also moving forward, the defense, as they spoke to media today, said that they are in the process of appealing issues in this trial. They're hopeful that the appellate judge will actually release Harvey Weinstein pending an appeal on his convictions today. Talking about a team of lawyers who met over the weekend, appellate lawyers, in preparation for that process. So we are here in New York, and we will be updating our viewers, especially when March 11th approaches and sentencing hearing will be had here at the Manhattan Courthouse. Back to you.
All right, thank you, Chanley. When we come back, your reaction, the best part of the night. What do you think about today? We'll have it for you right after this. Stay with us. Welcome back to Court TV and our continuing coverage of the breaking news. There you see Harvey Weinstein getting cuffed in the New York courtroom today after the jury returned 2 guilty verdicts, which carry a maximum penalty of 29 years in prison. He still has California to look forward to. His exposure there, if convicted, another 28 years. The 67-year-old on his way he is at Rikers Island. We understand he is at Rikers Island in the medical unit there, transported earlier this afternoon by ambulance to get there. Harvey Weinstein guilty. All right, time for our social media comments from our viewers, and our comment of the day comes from Corey Chandra. Congratulations to the jury for their ability to convict Harvey Weinstein. I was doubtful, very surprised on forcible oral sex conviction. Harvey Weinstein belongs in prison. Now on to California. Bernarda, were you surprised on the Mimi Haley conviction because of the relationship that she had with Harvey Weinstein post-assault?
Ted, I wasn't surprised, but then again, you got to think about this. I've been in criminal law for over 16 years. So I'm used to seeing these type of victims. I'm used to seeing these victims that aren't perfect. It's just, it's unfortunately just a part of life. So I didn't expect the perfect victim to actually just show up in court and for the jury to believe everything that they said and for them to come with no error on their part. But I wasn't surprised. I thought Mimi Haley was credible. The one thing that did stick out in my head, though, is that Mimi Haley did say that when this sexual act was performed to her was that she was on her period. So that did stick out to me because I just couldn't picture that happening. But obviously the jury was able to found her credible and believed what she said happened.
Yeah, I think that detail went a long way. It stuck out in a lot of people's mind because of the level of disgustingness. Jennifer Carter says the facts are Harvey Weinstein was found guilty on 2 counts. This will open Pandora's box for future cases to be brought into the light. Titus, does this change the game? Is this case that important? Are people, because people are watching it, does this allow people to come forward now with a little bit more confidence that the system works?
It's definitely going to put a larger spotlight on those who are rich or are in the public eye, to the extent that they won't be able to hide behind their notoriety or their money in order to get away from what they've done. Now, as far as regular Joe Blows, it's not going to make a difference. You're still going to have the situation of where you mentioned before, where the defense's strategy is to attack the credibility of the victim. However, when it comes to very famous individuals such as Bill Cosby, Harvey Weinstein, they won't be able to rely upon their name as a shield.
Sarah Martini says, I am heartbroken. I am sorry, Harvey. Evidence did not matter to this jury. James, a lot of people thought that the victims in this case knew full well what they were getting into. Your take on this comment and the ramifications of this trial, could it also swing that pendulum to the point where innocent people are in that defendant's chair?
Well, I don't think anybody's here arguing that Harvey Weinstein is innocent of everything.
No, I'm saying in the future somebody else.
Right. Well, listen, there's a lot, and there's enough to go around here for sure. And in this case, certainly the victim's allegations were significant enough where he couldn't hide behind his position of power or his authority, a non-disclosure agreement. I mean, this is, quite frankly, it still boils down to a credibility, and that's what the jury had to find, was that these particular victims were credible in their allegations. And I think the defense did as best a job as they could do in mounting the defense the quid pro quo, let's say, because of the position of power that he held, that these women may have been bargaining for some position, trying to get a role in a movie or something to that effect. The fact that they came back or continued the relationship even after this happened, I mean, look, there's enough to go around here, and you could certainly attack the credibility of some of these victims who came forward and said, hey, wait a minute, when did you complain to the police? When did this become a crime? That's certainly something that I could see arguing as a defense attorney.
Dave E. says, while I get that everybody deserves representation, I will never respect those who defend sexual predators, especially women. So glad this trial is over and that the jury got it. I hope all others, they are in all walks of life, are on alert and realize their days are numbered. Prey on predators, get all predators, and enablers. The last part of that, Jesse Lahl, enablers. Harvey Weinstein did not operate alone. Many of the accusers had tales of bodyguards and people around him. What kind of a message does this send to not only maybe the Harvey Weinsteins, but those that have stood by and either enabled or watched and said nothing?
It is a strong message. You know, these strong, powerful individuals with their empire and their entourage of people who can protect them and help deliver these victims to these individuals. I hope this trial sends a strong message to them that they could be as culpable and as liable for helping to facilitate these kind of crimes.
All right, last one, Linda Thomas Carter. He is going to die in prison. He's already 67. Well, that may be true, maybe not. We'll have to wait and see. The maximum penalty that he faces, of course, again, 29 years, but that would be the max. All right, I want to thank our think tank for joining us tonight, criminal defense attorneys Titus Nichols and Jesse Lahl, and trial attorney Bernarda Villalona, and criminal defense attorney James Porfino. Thank you all. Again, today, the breaking news, Harvey Weinstein, convicted of 2 counts. He is going to prison. He's in jail tonight. Thanks for watching.